When was the last time someone told you your dreams were too big or too impractical, not serious enough? Maybe it wasn't even someone else. Maybe it was that voice in your head telling you to grow up and get real. So in my 20s, I was that person, the one rolling my eyes at artists and creatives. I thought they were self-indulgent. Like, how are you helping anyone by making a wall look prettier? If you want to make a difference in the world, shouldn't you be solving real problems? But eventually, I realized I was dead wrong. The urge to create isn't just some cute hobby. It's one of the most powerful forces that we have. And I'm not just talking about feelings here. Science backs this up. Creating actually changes your brain. It reduces pain. It helps process trauma. And get this, you don't even have to be good at it. Just the act of creating does the magic. But here's the thing. We live in a world that wants us to consume, not create. Just keep scrolling, keep watching, keep buying. Stay quiet and stay in line. They tell us art is just a hobby, something to do after the real work is done. But let's get real about why that is. A system that wants to keep people quiet and compliant doesn't want them creating. Because creators shake things up. They imagine new possibilities. They take up space. Look at history. Every major change started with someone who dared to create something new. So the system doesn't tell you that you can't create. That would be too obvious. Instead, it convinces you that you shouldn't even try. Unless you're naturally talented, unless you can make money from it, unless you can be the best. And I fell for this lie for years. I dismissed art as fluff until I started seeing its real power. And so here's what I want you to consider. What if that urge to create isn't just some random impulse? What if it's actually the key to unlocking who you really are? What if art isn't just about pretty pictures, but about transforming lives? Today, our guest is Amie McNee. She's an author, creativity coach, and the voice behind the beloved platform Inspired to Write. Her upcoming book, We Need Your Art, is a powerful manifesto for creators who want to get out of their own way and make art. So in this episode, 3 key things you will learn are why creating is a rebellious act and how to own that power, how to ditch the perfectionism that's keeping you stuck, and the science behind how creativity rewires your brain and changes your body. Before we go deep today, I want to give you a little gift, and I want to give it to you every single day. It's called the Morning Mind Love. I know how life can be. You're all fired up after an inspiring episode, and then a new day or a new challenge comes at you, and it's just hard to keep up that energy. Well, the Morning Mind Love is kind of like an oracle from your higher self to help you start each day with a positive focus. Plus, when you sign up, you get 2 free gifts, a 30-minute binaural meditation and 30 days of journaling prompts to help you remember who you truly are. And it's all completely free. So join over 9,000 people and go to mindlove.com to sign up or text the word morning to 33777.
We underestimate just how powerful it is to claim the title that you are lusting after. And so I'm always put it in your bio. I don't care, put it in your bio. I'm like, write it down, make it happen. Like, because I think once we claim these words, our actions, there's consequences, and we start showing up in honor of that title. We can also do it the other way around, in that if you are showing up, if you are speaking, if you're practicing your speaking, if you are writing words, if you are painting on canvases, if you are singing, then you are an artist. Like, if you are doing it, then you are it. And I don't know how else you can qualify it. Like, if you are doing the action, you have earned that title. And I think we've got a lot of narratives that, again, you need to be chosen. Someone needs to pick you. You need to be making money. You need to be successful. If you are making the thing, then you are the maker.
Turn up your frequency with Mind Love. Bite-sized brain hacks for seekers, dreamers, and doers. It's time to give your mind a little love with your host, Melissa Monti.
So tell us, what made you decide that art would become your life story?
I think it happened by accident. It was not a plan. I just kept being called back to making stuff and creating stuff. It was so instinctual. I was told, by our cultural stories that it was something probably to be left in childhood, and we grow up, we grow out of this need to create. And I was like, something's wrong because I'm not growing out of this. I still want to tell stories. I still want to be on stage. I still want to play. And so, no matter how hard I fought it, and I did fight it because I was incredibly ashamed that I wasn't moving out of the stage of being a daydreamer and being imaginative, I just kept coming back to art.
Why do you think that is the story that we're told? Where
Mm.
my sister-in-law is an artist, and I can see herself in your story of people telling her, wait, you're majoring in art? I'm paying all I can
Yes.
hear my father-in-law, you're paying all this money for this fancy school and you're just gonna learn art. But she's stuck with it. And even though she's gone back and forth between like hair and then back to art, the art always pulls her back. And so I'm curious, why do you think we've adopted this story as a culture where art is frivolous?
It is. That's the narrative. You nailed it. I want to say before I get into this topic, which is a beautiful question, that I really do consider art to be such a broad, like, word. And that what you're doing with this podcast, Melissa, is an art form. And I think a lot of people it's kind of an elitism, or we pedestal the term art and say, oh, art is like paintbrush, paintbrush and canvas. But I want to remind all of us and anyone who's listening that you are an artist in some way or another. You have a drive to create something, to connect with another person. And for me, that is artistry. I just want to make sure no one's listening to this podcast and has said, oh, this isn't for me. It is for you. Like, we have an inherent drive to create as humans. But we do have this narrative, and we've grown up in a culture that says it's frivolous, it's decoration, it's not really necessary. Oh, it's nice for you that you get to do your paintings and I have to do real work. Like, these are the sort of narratives that we're fed. And I have many theories about why we're living in a culture that has perpetuated these narratives. Some are more skeptical and cynical than others. But I think we live in a system that would rather its people stay quiet and compliant. And when we take up space, whether that's on a podcast or whether that's with our books or whether it's with paintings, we make a lot of noise and we ruffle feathers and we take up space in a way that I think a lot of systems would prefer us not to. And that is a slightly cynical take, but I do think we live in a world where, the industrialist, capitalist system would rather you just stay, do work for someone else, and don't make too much noise. But the artist always makes noise.
Ooh, I love that response. I am just reminded of how, what's that quote that says, I'm not in the business of making a nation of thinkers, we're making a nation of workers, or something like that.
Oh, I don't know what it is, but I like the sound of it.
Oh, well, it's more of like the conspiracy of how the elitists that make all of the decisions, even behind the government, didn't want an entire civilization of people that were thinking for themselves and creating for themselves. They wanted people that are going to sit down, obey, follow the 9 to 5 schedule, do their little spot on the machinery, and not ask a lot of questions, not disrupt. And I think that is one of the reasons why, as you've beautifully put, where art is sort of demeaned, like it's not prioritized, because that's using the parts of our brain that they don't necessarily want us to use to keep us compliant.
It's so funny because we've been told a story that, like, oh, art doesn't help the world, it's frivolous, it's silly. But the reality is that, artists make revolutions, and artists move culture, and artists reveal big ideas and create ideas and spread ideas. Like, art is a political act, and it's a rebellious act, and it's a revolutionary act. But we're repeatedly told this story that, oh, that's nice that you're painting, oh, that's cute, that's a nice hobby. It's constantly sidelined. And I think, again, I don't want to sound like a big conspiracy theorist, but I do think that I do think that there is some sort of There's a sidelining of art for a reason because it's a very, very powerful force in this world. And so they've tried to convince us otherwise. And a big part of what I'm here to do is to remind artists that when you take up space and you create art, whether it's for money or not for money, whether it's for a lot of people or for your kids, however you do it, in whatever big or small way, that's a revolutionary act that is going against a lot of the systems that are trying to keep you very small and very quiet.
Yeah. And, I notice though, when people do approach this term conspiracy theorist and like, oh, I'm going to tread this water, but I'm not going to go too deep. But when you think about it, the word conspiracy theorist was deliberately popularized to discredit people questioning official narratives right after the JFK assassination. So anything that has an actual term, conspiracy theorist, anti-vaxxer, and like all of those things, that's what I'm normally leaning in. I'm like, oh, so they've created a word about this so that people don't go any further because they know if you go further, chances are you're not going to come back. So I lean into conspiracy theorists because we all know there's a conspiracy happening at every given moment because it's sort of human nature to chase control and power and greed. And if you get high enough and around the right people, you're just going to do that. So I wish everyone would just accept we should all be a little bit of a conspiracy theorist. We should all also understand discernment enough to dial ourselves back when we go a little too far and we're just becoming paranoid of everything. But we should always be questioning the official narratives.
I love this idea of always questioning, always thinking, always having ideas. And if we find ourselves feeling like we can't have ideas or we can't question something or we feel like we're being stifled, which, a lot of artists feel, that's when you've got to start asking, okay, well, what narratives are at play that are stopping me from expressing myself in the way that I want to express myself? But I love this idea of being a questioner, just always asking questions, always being curious, and allowing ourselves to really think and sit with ideas and get more information or get curious about stuff. And giving ourselves permission to do that is an important part of being a human and an important part of being an artist.
Yes. And I think I went through a phase too of being like, buying into the narrative that art is unimportant. And then when I really started to understand like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and then questioning, well, why do they only want us focusing on the survival part of it? What happens when we start activating the parts of our brain? And it might just look like art to one person, but when that part of the brain is activated, when suddenly we're having new thought, new creation, we become a threat to the system. But I think that's exactly where we need to be if we want to continuously innovate and actually figure out how to create from our hearts instead of just staying within the confinement of what we've been told.
It is the artist's job to ruffle feathers. It's why people pleasers find it very hard to create and create earnestly and vulnerably, because if you constantly try to make things that please people, there's an incongruity there. Like art just doesn't work very well when you're trying to please everyone. In fact, if a piece of art pleases everyone, I don't know what you've made, but it wasn't art. And leaning into that idea that it is terrifying. It's so vulnerable. It's so scary. But understanding that your creative process will piss people off. People won't like it. People will find it too much. And that's beautiful. That means you're doing it perfectly. Like you're nailing this thing. Lean in. If you feel cringe, if you feel like, oh my God, don't know what to do with me, like, well done. This is what's happening. If people are looking at you and going, what the fuck is that person doing with their life? You're nailing it.
Ooh, and I also see that one of the beauties of art is that it moves people through a whole spectrum of emotions. I'm sure many people that are listening have seen something and they're like, there's something evoked in them and they don't even know what or why. And so those are the paintings that you end up standing in front of. And I feel like TV wants to show us like the ridiculousness of art, where you go to a gallery and there's like a white canvas with one black dot and everyone's like calling it genius. But that's not how most people are creating. They create from all different places. And if we look at architecture made a few thousands of years ago, we prioritized art. Every corner of that building had like this intricate, supposedly handmade design. That is another narrative that I questioned, but it moves you. Whereas now we're like embracing modern Western, and I guess there's some things that look good, but it's so emotionless at some points. But it's interesting because if we think about what the news does, the news also moves us. We just stay within the lower hierarchy of emotion, where it's like it moves us to fear or outrage.
Yeah.
Those are the things that are compelling out of us. So why wouldn't I want to look at something that might bring out melancholy or subtle joy or curiosity?
That's such a beautiful way to put it, Melissa. I love the way your mind works. I think you're right. I think that when we consume, especially when we're consuming on our phones or consuming news, we are kept in a survival state. And again, like I lean towards the cynical view that these systems want us consuming and not creating. They want us to be stuck in a freeze mode of just like being on these apps because it benefits them. But if we can get to a place where we can regulate ourselves to come out of that space and then start creating or like consuming art, we can begin to thrive. And I think art has a huge role in healing us, but it has an even bigger role in allowing humanity to thrive beyond survival, like really letting us like be our most brilliant, both in the making and the consumption of creativity. And there's very cool research that looks at this now. Like art heals us, but then it goes that next step and it allows us to be the best version of ourselves. And we are so connected in communities. We are thriving like cellularly, like in our mental health. Art just lifts the fucking game. And again, that I think that scares systems and scares people, and they would much rather have us like completely attached to our phones, just scrolling, numb and very obedient and quiet. But when we get to this creative process and when we consume other people's art, it just lifts the game. And we're not being given access to that very easily now.
There's so much confusing information out there about nutrition and gut health. I can't tell you how many experts I've interviewed who completely contradict each other, and I don't air the interview. And don't even get me started on those social media health experts who are secretly getting paid by big food companies to promote ultra-processed foods. That's exactly why I got excited about Zoe, a science-backed nutrition company that's getting really specific about your body. They've built the world's largest microbiome database and created the most scientifically advanced at-home gut test. So when they analyze your results, they can see patterns and make connections that other companies just don't have the data to find. And this isn't just another trendy wellness thing. Their results are backed by randomized controlled trials. Participants were 4 times more likely to report better sleep and more energy. Because when your gut's happy, everything just works better. I love that they're cutting through all the noise with real science. No more guessing about what foods work for your body. Go to Zoe.com and find out what Zoe membership could do for you. And because you listen to Mind Love, you can use the exclusive code MINDLOVE10 to get 10% off your membership. As a Zoe member, you'll get an at-home test kit and personalized nutrition program to help you make smarter food choices that support your gut. That's Zoe.com. Use code MINDLOVE10 at checkout. Trust your gut. Trust Zoe. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. You know how everyone talks about red flags in relationships? I think we need to flip the script. What if we spent more time looking for the green flags, the little signs that tell us, yes, this is good, this is healthy? My journey with therapy has taught me something powerful. It's not just about fixing what's broken. It's about building something beautiful. It's about learning what healthy relationships actually look like and then creating that in our own lives. And that's why I'm excited to tell you about BetterHelp. They've made therapy so convenient and accessible, serving over 5 million people worldwide. With more than 30,000 credentialed therapists, each with different specialties, you can find someone who really gets what you're working on. And what's great is everything's online, and you can easily switch therapists at no extra cost until you find your perfect match. Whether you're dating, married, building friendships, or just working on yourself, therapy can help you build relationships that truly support your growth. Discover your relationship green flags with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/mindlove today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/mindlove. I just did a keynote that was actually titled, You Are the Creator.
Oh, beautiful.
I think what people don't realize is that you are always creating. You're always creating your reality. And so often we I think a lot of personal growth for people starts with like The Secret, or they start following some manifesting accounts online. And then they're like, oh my God, I got this magical power to create my reality. But then they treat it like it's optional, like it's something that they can put down when they're not using it, not realizing that. And I realized this when I got to a place of where I was just at my lowest rock bottom. And I was like, how did I even get here, given where I came from? And I realized it was all of those times I pushed down what I was really feeling, all of the times that I bought into somebody else's story, all of the times that I prioritized somebody else over my own needs. And every single thought that I let run rampant in my head was also creating, even if I didn't know it. And I feel like if people really understood that, they would take more time to be in those other areas of their mind. Because if you allow yourself to fall into the trap of staying within the matrix of survival and fear and consumerism, that is what you're going to be creating moment by moment with all of your subconscious thoughts and your autopilot actions. But if you spend time playing and activating your creative brain and creating and drawing and flourishing, like you said, in the thriving mindset, your subconscious is going to be creating from that level too.
Oh, just delicious. I couldn't agree more. And this idea that we're constantly creating our own reality is so important for us to understand. You're right. You can't time off that. You can't say, actually, I'm not going to create my reality right now. Like we are constantly creating in every moment of the day. I always say that like I'm an artist when I'm like scouring the gluten-free section of my supermarket. I'm the artist when I'm on my walks. Like I am constantly the artist, the creator of my own life. I am the art. I am the final piece of art I will ever create. Um, and we need to sink into that narrative because this is kind of, it goes beyond the creative act of writing a book or painting a painting. It's our whole lives. And I think that something that we're really struggling with culturally at the moment is this feeling of purposelessness and meaningless and a lack of agency. And we look at the news and we think, well, there's nothing for me to fucking do. I'm useless. I'm just one person. And we get this lethargy that again leads us back to just consumption, consumption, consumption. When we move into that state of I am the creator, I am the artist, not just of my projects and my vision, but of my own life, we can reclaim that agency. And I think if we start with art, we can often bring that agency that we find in our creative projects into our life. Like when I write a book, I become the god of that little realm in a book. Like I'm the authority of as to what happens in my stories. And I have this sense of purpose and meaningfulness and agency in my books. And what I've taken from that creative process is understanding that I also write my own life. I also have agency in the way I am and how I interact with the world and how I speak to myself. And so as I've written my stories, I've learned that I can write my own internal monologue. I can learn that I can write my own life. And that power is often learned through the creative process.
Oh my gosh, you're in my head. The program that I'm launching next month is on that exact same thing about owning your story and understanding that you are the creator of your own life and how to actually do that. And that includes processing your story in a way where you're the hero of your own journey. And then also seeing how it connects to what you actually want to do with your life. And so I'm curious for you. I know that the word artist has evolved for you, and you just described it so beautifully of being the artist of your own life moment by moment. But I know a lot of people also feel like they need permission to call themselves an artist. And it's this big thing in just the art world, let alone having the average person who isn't a painter or a writer claiming that identity for themselves.
Oh, this is one of my favorite topics, Melissa. I do feel we're on the same page today. um, because this is one of my favorite topics because it was one of the things that I navigated with a great difficulty. You know, my artistry is writing, and I didn't think I had earned the title of author until a publisher had told me I was allowed to use that word. I definitely didn't think I was allowed to use the word artist until, you know, I got like painting with a canvas. I thought these titles were something that would have to be bestowed upon me by the authorities. And again, this comes back to these systems that want to gatekeep art, who can and who can't create. Because we've lived in a system where it's like you need to get permission from someone, preferably in a suit, preferably in an office, preferably they work 9 to 5. They can tell you whether you're allowed to call yourself author, artist, singer, musician, actor. And so I was just waiting, waiting, and waiting, just begging people to say, please pick me, please give me permission to do what I know I am born to do. And I was asking for permission every day. I had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rejection letters. And then, and when I tell this story, it sounds like it happened in an instant, but it didn't, as so many of these things do. Like it took days and days, maybe months, where I was like, I've been rejected by all of these people in the gatekeeping situations in the publishing houses. But what is way, way worse than that is that every day I do not give myself permission. Every day I reject myself. Every day I say, you are not good enough to do this. And I realized I had an opportunity to coronate myself author, to anoint myself as artist, to take up space as a creative person with absolutely no one's fucking permission. And I did it. And that's why I get to do this shit full time now because I chose myself. And that's why I get to do this stuff joyfully now because I didn't wait for anyone to tell me I could. I realized that I had what it took. All that I needed was a desire to create, to tell stories, and that was enough. And so I wrote these books, I put on the crown, I waited for no one.
That reminds me of my first keynote that I was doing. And I remember understanding how many hours I needed to put in to really perfect this keynote on a professional level. And there was something difficult because I wasn't getting paid for this. And so I was like really hesitant and I was really skeptical that it was going to work. Like, if I just keep practicing, am I going to get that good? And I remember one day I just woke up not feeling like doing the work. But then I was like, if you're going to be a highly paid keynote speaker, you need to identify as such. That not play in this like, maybe this will work, maybe it won't, maybe I'll give it a go and I'll half-ass it and then I'll get up there and then who's going to want to hire me again if I half-ass it, you know? And so instead I'm like, this is part of my job. This is what I have to do. I'm going to be practicing several hours a day. And I was going on a lot of walks to memorize the speech. And I just acted as if. And then I got onto the stage. I got a standing ovation. People were coming up to me afterwards asking how I learned to speak. And yes, I did quite a significant training, but the majority of the work was also in my identification process because I wouldn't have shown up to all of those practice hours if I wouldn't have just claimed that title right there.
It's such a lesson because let's go with author here. Why would I turn up to my books if I am not an author? Like if I don't claim that identity, my actions don't reflect it. And so I think we underestimate just how powerful it is to claim the title that you are lusting after. And so I'm always put it in your bio. I don't care, put it in your bio. I'm like, put it, write it down, make it happen. Like because I think once we claim these words, our actions, there's consequences and we start showing up in honor of that title. We can also do it the other way around in that if you are showing up, if you are speaking, if you're practicing your speaking, if you are writing words, if you are painting on canvases, if you are singing, then you are an artist. Like if you are doing it, then you are it. And I don't know how else you can qualify. Like if you are doing the action, you have earned that title. And I think we've got a lot of narratives that again, you need to be chosen, someone needs to pick you, you need to be making money, you need to be successful. If you are making the thing, then you are the maker. And I want you to claim that title. It's a rebellious, revolutionary act that says fuck you to a lot of systems that, again, would rather you not take up space.
I think for a lot of people, it's the comparison because they assume, okay, well, these are the artists that I know, or these are the writers that I know, or these are the speakers that I know. And here's the videos or the Instagram posts or the highlight reels that I'm able to see from them. And so when they sit down and they have their shitty first draft or their what looks like a mess on a canvas, they're like, well, no, I can't be an artist because this is what I'm producing. But what they don't see is that even the professional artist has, or the author has the shitty first draft.
Mm. We have just, we've had artistry like medicinally cleansed or something. What's the word? It's like being like washed out. And we've seen like this very pale version of what it actually is, which is artistry is mess and fuck ups and failures and just like being so frustrated. Like that is what artistry is. If you are sitting on a pile of rejection letters, boom, you are qualified. If you have got a shitty first draft, writer. If you froze on stage as a speaker, unbelievable qualification to be a speaker. Like this life is hard and messy and very vulnerable. And if you look at any artist and you think that they have escaped those moments of embarrassment or vulnerability or failure, you are entirely and utterly wrong. They're just not willing to talk about it.
Yeah, I remember when I was starting a podcast and I was sitting there thinking about how daunting this idea was that I had never interviewed anybody. And I remember just thinking, man, I wish I would have started a couple of years ago when I first had the idea. And then I was like, in a couple of years, I'm going to be having that same thought. Am I going to start right now or not? And so I did. And now the amount of times I look back and I'm like, man, I'm approaching 500 interviews on this thing. Like I can call myself a master at this point. But one of the things your book challenges is the idea that creativity has to be monetized to be valuable. How did you personally break free from that mindset?
This is a really complex conversation for me. And it's not as binary as I think people think I'm going to be. I really have a hard time having this conversation because I fiercely believe in the monetary value of art. And as someone who wanted to be a pro as a writer, I speak to a lot of artists who really struggle with shame for wanting to monetize their art. And so I speak a lot into that space where I need artists to understand that your art is worth money. When you create something, you are giving something very generous to the world. And I believe that we are living in a time, there's never been a better time to become a pro artist. That being said, on the other side of the table, we have this narrative that it's not worth being an artist unless you make money. And this needs to be challenged. Both of these narratives need to be challenged. You know, it's so deeply ironic. And again, it comes back around to that little conspiracy theorist that they just don't want us creating, that the artists who want to make money with their art feel deeply ashamed, and the artists who don't want to make money with their art feel deeply ashamed. And it's like, okay, what are we meant to do? But art creating, even if you make no money, it is worth creating. Even if it's not seen by nobody, it's worth creating. Even if it gets no likes on Instagram, art has inherent worth. It is incredibly potent vehicle for understanding ourselves, for processing pain, for other people to process their pain. The creative process has been constantly undermined as something that can only be valued if you are Taylor Swift. When the reality is that the way you sing in the shower profoundly affects your body, your life, and the way you approach your day. And it's just not something that's talked about. We're fortunate now that a lot more research is going into the power of art. The book Your Brain on Art came out a few years ago. It's just like a compendium of incredible research that's being done around the power of art on our bodies, minds, and communities. And the research is freaking in. When you create, not for money, when you just create for fucking fun, like amazing things happen. And please do not underestimate that.
You actually write about art changing our brains and bodies. Elaborate on that.
Yeah. And so it's really what I was learning about in Your Brain on Art by these two incredible women and researchers. We have studies now that look at, you know, what dance does to people in pain. This is the healing aspect of art that we were talking about before, where I think there's an amazing study of like people with chronic pain dancing for, I think it was like for 4 weeks, once a week. And that they looked 16 weeks in the future and their pain was still reduced. There is something about creating, whether it is dancing, they look at just consuming like brightly colored paintings, like that does something to us. Like our brains change when we consume something we love that feels resonant to us. There is so much incredibly exciting research that is coming out that says when you make or when you consume creations, our bodies they heal and then they delight.
This reminds me of what we were just talking about, where I don't think people understand how much our subconscious processes are creating. Like I said, always creating, but even our structure. Have you seen videos of people where it's like they're people who remain depressed for a long time, their face will actually change shape. And it's because their disposition is creating their physiology. And so if we are looking at like this, like I'm thinking of Richard Dawkins' hierarchy of consciousness, all of those lower level things, if we're only engaging in that, then that's going to be creating not just our thought processes, but our physiology, our worldview, all sorts of things. And if we train ourselves to create, to be in these higher brain spaces, then those are also going to be activated in our subconscious processes as well. And so I'm just sort of creating connections, because I'm also thinking of this woman I interviewed a couple of years ago. I wish I could remember who it was, but she talked about, she was a neuroscientist that proved that spirituality actually changes your brain. So it'll create more gray matter, similar to how meditation
it's same as art.
yeah,
Same as
and
art.
it gives you a more optimistic outlook. And that's the same areas of activation that art is doing. And so it's these creation, these hope, this optimism that we're training ourselves to lean toward. And that's going to affect more than just what you're doing in the moment.
It runs throughout your whole life. I truly believe it. Like, it changes you in a very profound way. It's so beautiful. It excites me so much. And I think, I speak about this a lot, and I think people go, oh, that's nice. That's nice. I'm like, no, listen to me. This isn't just nice. I think because art has a huge range of impacts on people, like it helps, pain, it reduce pain. It helps, increase our cognitive function. It helps our mental health. It helps our communities flourish. There's so many things that art does that it's almost like too much. We're like, whoa, it's like too good. And so I think people don't listen to me when I'm saying it. They're like, all right, that sounds like almost magical or surreal. And it's like, Amie, she's the art girl. Like, of course she's going to say this. It's actually so exciting, like in a very scientific, like pragmatic way. Just look at this research. Like, this is very exciting. If you're not using art in your life, like, what are you doing? Creativity is the missing pillar in self-development. No one's talking about how it can enhance our lives and move us from this place of survival to thriving.
So when we think of beginning a creative practice, for somebody out there who doesn't see themselves as a painter, hasn't been writing much, where would you start to open up a creative practice?
So my mantra is baby steps, baby steps, baby steps. I think when we think about moving into an artist space, we're like, well, if I'm going to write a book, that means I have to write 100,000 words, or I want to draw like realism. So I have to be able to draw a human face that looks exactly like a human face. These huge, intimidating goals stop us before we start. And you'll be like Melissa, and in a few years' time, you'll be like, oh, why didn't I start back then? And you'll just never start. So we have to start with baby steps, and we have to also embrace the fact that we will suck. And that's a very hard thing for people to come to terms with, but not just in the beginning of your creative journey, you will find it all the way up until your death. Like, you will suck at some points. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things that art teaches us is it dismantles perfectionism. Because if you want to be good, if you want a joyful creative life, you cannot have these standards. You have to allow yourself to make mess and play. You have to encourage that inner child who cannot draw within the lines. And so when someone says, I don't do anything, like, what can I do? I want you to get curious about like what it is that interests you. And then I want you to make a load of mess. And I want you to do it for like 10 minutes every other day. Small steps, messy steps, and just be curious about what delights you.
I think of that stage of suck as kind of an initiation. And when I honed into this way of thinking about it, it's actually really fun because it gives me an even deeper respect for everyone who's great at something, because it's like we like to think we're still living in our like third grader brains where like I'm in the corner drawing rainbows and Joseph is over there drawing a full-on detailed comic book, and all of a sudden I start comparing for the first time and I'm like, maybe he's the artist and maybe I'm not. And meanwhile, I don't see that he's going home drawing for 6 hours a day. And I'm just thinking, like, I think there's a period of time where a lot of children start to think of things as like a natural talent versus not. And we carry that on through adulthood. And it's like, oh, that person's the snowboarder, or that person's the artist or the singer. They must have just always been good. But no, even if you have a slight natural talent, you still are going to go through a period of suck and it being hard and it feeling unnatural. And you have to get over that in order to get good at something. And so now I kind of lean into those moments of like, trying something new. I'm going to be really awful for a while, but this is awesome because it brings me back into like my youthful brain of the willingness. Like, imagine if my toddler stopped walking because he was wobbly his first few steps, like their whole lives are stages of suck until they get a little bit better at it. And it's just, it's nice to be able to dip back into that place as an adult.
I just think we live in a culture that doesn't want adults to be beginners again. It doesn't allow us to be beginners again. And I refute it. And I think artists are a part of a movement that say, no, I refuse. I want to be a beginner all the time. I want to constantly be starting over. I want to constantly be trying things that are too hard for me because that is the sign of a human that is enjoying and relishing life and being curious. And so I want all of us to really like if you haven't sucked at something for a long time, what are you doing? Like if you haven't like what are you up to? If you can't point to the huge pile of shitty art, like are you practicing your creativity in a way that's serving you? Like I want you to list your failures like of the last week. I want you to list your sucking of the last week. I want you to list the shitty art that you've made the last week. Like when you can come to me with a huge big pile of, oh my God, I sucked a lot this week. And then I'm like, wow, that's an artist who is doing the work and they are going to fucking thrive.
What would you say is the most persistent myth about creativity that you had to unlearn?
Oh, there's so many, Melissa. We have so many myths around this act, and it's so interesting that it has become so mythologized and so co-opted by these like very toxic narratives. But again, it comes right back to the beginning of this conversation. I think there are reasons why there's so much mythology around it. I think we actually touched upon one of the most prominent ones just then, which is that you need to be good at it in order to pursue it. I think because of our schooling systems and our education systems, we're told that you have to have natural talent for something in order to keep going at it, especially the arts. If you can't sing as a kid, you're out. Like you're not being encouraged to sing ever again. If you can't paint as a kid, you're fucking around in the art class and the art teacher doesn't care because they're only focusing on the ones that have natural talent. And I think there's this perfectionist myth that you've got to have something innate within you in order to give it a shot. And it's bullshit. Like some of the most incredible artists in the world had no innate talent. They were just curious about something and went for it. They allowed themselves to be vulnerable and infused a little part of themselves into their art. We're not looking for perfect art. We're looking for human art. We're looking for connection, for a raw, like exposing piece of creation that makes me feel something. We keep thinking that art is meant to be immaculate when it's meant to be messy. And I think just as a little sidebar, as we move into this world of AI, and we're going to get AI that gets very, very good at making art, that we need to sink even deeper into the humanity of creation. Because I want to see where you fucked something up in your vase because the kiln didn't pot it right. I want to see your pain and your story in your book rather than some AI's like fabrication of what it thinks a human story is. I want us to lean deeply into the imperfections in a way that is very revolutionary and very counter this myth that art is elite, art is on a pedestal, art should be something pristine and holy when it is holy, but it's only holy because it's very, very human.
You talk about art as a form of rebellion. That's really intriguing to me because if you can't tell, I'm kind of the rebel conspiracy theorist over here in a healthy way. Like I said, I think everything should be questioned all the time. And that's the only way to expand what we currently have and to think that we've got it all figured out. That's you have to hold the worldview that we have it all figured out to not be a so-called conspiracy theorist. And
Mm.
when will that ever be true? I hope it's never true. Just the intricacies of the way life is on this earth, we will always be discovering, and our human minds will probably always be slightly incapable of grasping the full picture. And so if we ever think we've got it all figured out, we're on the wrong path. So anyway,
Oh, as soon as you know it all, quit.
yeah. So art as a form of rebellion is intriguing to me. What comes up when you think about it that way?
Oh, Melissa, there are so many ways that just the creative act rebels against so many of the expectations society puts upon you. And I think we wonder why we have so many issues and blocks when it comes to creating. We're like, it can't be that hard. Why am I struggling so much? And it's like, oh, I'm so sorry. This is not your fault. We live in a society that has so many myths around the creative process and so many stories around on the creative process that mean that, of course, it's going to be hard for us to pursue this because you've been told that your voice doesn't matter. You've been told that art is frivolous and for kids or for the retired. You've been told that art is only for the elite, only for the educated, only for those who have money. There are so many stories that come with pursuing art. And so it is our job as the artist to say, absolutely fuck all of that and rebel. Take up space with your voice, let your stories be heard. Stop consuming and start creating. Like just that in itself is a rebellious act. Get off your phone, put the apps down and go and make something with your hands, they don't want you to do that. They do not want you to do that. Um, if you just look at if you next time you create, like watch what you're doing and you will see rebellion in every little inch of it. It's rebellion against that teacher that told you that you'll never make it as an artist. It's rebellion against, that the parents that said, this is not a serious pursuit, or that said that you were foolish for trying. It is a rebellion against a world that says it would just be better if you just stayed still, quiet, and didn't do anything.
So when you think of creative success, how do you define or measure that?
It is so personal. And so my creative success is defined by me, for me, and it changes on the regular. But it must be defined by me. And I truly believe that because we do have these narratives around what it is to be a successful artist, i.e., it's valid to be an artist if you are incredibly wealthy and incredibly famous. So those two like items are really the things that we've been taught are success as artists. And if you want that, I champion that. I back it. But you have to choose it because otherwise it has just been thrust upon you. You have to choose what success looks like for you. Otherwise, you'll accidentally wander into a life of creative success and you will hate it. We get to design our lives, as we've been talking about. We are the author of our own lives. We are the creators of our own lives. And we need to decide what success looks like for us. And for many people, a successful creative life means that you write poems and you send them to your love, and that's it. For other people, for me, I'm a highly ambitious little author. I want to create a community of people who love my historical fiction. For my new book, We Need Your Art, I want to see an uprising of artists because of this book. I want to see a call to arms for creatives because of my book. And I want to stand at the center of a revolution of creatives doing their fucking thing. For me, that is my success. But we all need to sit and dare and be brave enough to think about, okay, well, what is it I actually want here? And that is a very scary thing to do. Most of us would much rather prepare for failure than to prepare for our success.
It reminds me of the quote, if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. I think people take that quote and they apply it to one thing, but they don't really realize this is why I'm always pushing for people to have a vision for your life. Because if you're not steering that GPS point, you're just going to fall and get blown by whoever has a stronger vision than you that sucks you in. And so, or what your default, what I call your algorithm, is programmed to believe. And a lot of times we don't even really see what that is. But like you made the example of our automatic understanding of creative success is like basically someone else giving us permission. Like, oh, okay, now I'll sign you to this label. Or, oh, okay, now you can show your work here. But the reality is there's not a lot of people who make it to that level that maintain their creative freedom. And so if your entire purpose is to get your voice out there and to create from your heart, then you're actually getting in your own way if your definition of success is to then get signed or taken on by somebody, because then they're probably going to warp your motivation and your movement into what's going to benefit them. And so we have to think about these things. Like, what does it really look like? Okay, what is my automatic understanding of what the success is? Okay, does that still serve my original mission? If not, what do I need to work out? Let's talk about something that can make or break a business. Hiring. I remember when I was first scaling my business, I needed help, but the thought of sorting through endless resumes and conducting interview after interview just felt so overwhelming. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. What sets them apart is their sponsored jobs feature, which puts your job post right in front of the candidates you actually want to reach. So you don't have to sit there hoping that the right person stumbles across your listing. And here's what's amazing. Sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed get 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. In fact, every minute, 23 people are hired through Indeed worldwide. That's how effective their platform is at connecting the right people with the right opportunities. Plus, they make it super simple. There are no monthly subscriptions, no long-term contracts, and you only pay for results. It's exactly what you need when you're growing your business. Less hassle, more qualified candidates. So there's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/mindlove. Just go to Indeed.com/mindlove right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/mindlove. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
During President's Day savings at the Home Depot, get up to 35% off select appliances. Plus, save up to an extra $450 on select appliances like Whirlpool. Shop the side-by-side fingerprint-resistant stainless steel refrigerator with an indoor can caddy. Or the fingerprint-resistant stainless steel top control dishwasher with 3 5-inch shelves. Make the most of President's Day savings and our lowest prices guaranteed at the Home Depot. How doers get more done. See homedepot.com/price match for details. See store or online for details. Minimum purchase required.
Okay, does that still serve my original mission? If not, what do I need to work out?
I'm like violently nodding my head over here. The way I do it and the way I make sure that I'm still aligned with who I am is I do the core values. Like it's not really a test. Basically, I Google all the core values and there's like lists of like 150 words online. And they're like things like autonomy and beauty and connection and creativity, order, rules, strategy. And I whittle it down to my top 5. And so my biggest one is autonomy. And so do you think my success looks like being beholden to a whole heap of people? Again, who live in offices? No. And so I need to understand that if I'm striving for success that looks like being chosen and being beholden to other people, I'm out of alignment. That isn't my values, and I will not be happy in those spaces. So I need to look at what my success looks like as someone who needs autonomy. And that's going to look different to other people.
What has been the most profound transformation you've witnessed in someone who finally gave themselves permission to create?
There's just nothing that delights me more than talking to an artist who is like absolutely head over heels in love with a project. And so I can't think of one moment, but when I get to talk to a creative who just wants to tell me about the thing that they're making, and I see them as like this little god of their own creative realm, and they're just sitting in this throne and they're telling me about their kingdom, and they're so enthusiastic and everything about them. It's thriving, Melissa. That's what I'm talking about. It's thriving. And they want to tell me every intricate thing, and I can't even follow what the fuck they're talking about because it's getting so detailed. But just watching these artists who are so deep in their creative process and they shine, like they shine. And I see it with my husband and myself as well, because we're both authors. When we're talking about projects we're excited about, that's what humanity's about. Like that level of excitement and drive and passion. It's aliveness.
I was just having a conversation with my husband the other day where I'll be real. I have found mom guilt a little harder than I thought I would. When I had kids, I was like, well, I'm a conscious person who's always working on stuff. I'll watch this. But for some reason, no matter what I do, if I'm working, I kind of feel a little guilty that I'm not with them and vice versa. But we were talking about that and I was like, I need to go back to my vision, make sure it's all aligned, that I am, showing up as the mom that I want to be, that these children deserve. And also, I see my mission so clearly now that it is a fire inside that cannot be stopped. And so for a long time, there was a part of me that really wanted to be like, I wanted to want to be a stay-at-home mom. That makes sense. But I knew that I want to have enough time with them that they feel like they got a stay-at-home mom. They got that personal connection that I'm still able to lead and guide them the way that I want to. But also, I know that I'm here for a purpose. And I know that what I'm doing right now is so connected to that and that I'm living it and it can't be turned off. And I realize that not everyone gets to feel this, but they all have the capacity. They just have to choose that. And it might take a while to unravel. Like it took me a few years, but my dedication to just finding that for myself made it inevitable. And I wish that more people knew that.
There's nothing like just speaking to someone who is deep in their purpose. There's nothing like it. And I think this world needs a lot more purpose. And I think many of us have a purpose in the arts, but we've been denying it ourselves for our whole lives. And so I want more people to start getting curious about this creative calling that's been tugging at them for years, and they've been denying themselves, because we need people in their purpose. Because look at you, Melissa, like someone who is so determined and knows what they are doing, like it's so beautiful. And I just want to add that I speak to a lot of mothers who are artists, and I'm not a mother. Actually, as you were saying that, I'm someone who I really want to be a mother, but I don't. I really want it, but it's funny that it never occurred to me. But I speak to a lot of creative mothers, and I just remind them that it is the most generous act to demonstrate to your children how important creativity is, how important this creative life is to you. And I had a very creative parent. I had creative parents, and the honor I had in watching them, my dad, take time to do poetry. What a fucking privilege. Even if I wasn't allowed to talk to him in poetry time, but for me as a child to see his dedication to himself and to his work and to the creative process, that he taught me so much. And I want to remind creative parents that it is a generous thing to publicly show your kids that you are dedicated to your art, even if that means closing the door and saying, just give me 20 minutes.
Yeah, I've thought about the same thing with meditation, and kids are learning more through what we're showing them than what we're telling them. And
Yes.
we want to raise kids that don't end up putting everybody else before themselves. We have to show them what it looks like to actually go inside ourselves and ask ourselves questions and get in tune with our own inner guidance and activate parts of our brain that we want to be leading our lives. And that reminds me though, because with art in particular, whether it be writing, creating, whatever form of art, it could be marketing, everything's art in some way.
No, I firmly believe marketing is art.
Yes. And what gets in people's way though are the blocks. Sitting there and being like, well, I don't have anything to write, or I don't know where to put the first brush stroke. I don't know what to put on this landing page, like whatever.
Yes.
How has your understanding of creative blocks evolved?
Yeah, this is something that I go into hugely in the book, because we need your art. I need you to understand that. But even if we have a good grasp of understanding why art's important, we still come across all of these blocks, whether it's perfectionism, imposter syndrome, procrastination, comparison, jealousy. Like there are so many things that can get in our way and that cock block us from creating altogether. Like we just won't create. And so my big one and my big understanding, and I just learned it through witnessing my own blocks, is when you get stuck and you leave your computer because it's too hard, what are you running from? And that's my question again and again and again. What are you running from? And just noticing is so powerful. I'm running from boredom. I'm running from the feeling of not knowing what to do. I hate not knowing what to do. I'm running because I didn't like that last sentence and I felt embarrassed. I'm running from the feeling of being 12 again and having my art teacher yelling at me. It's curiosity again, Melissa. What are you running from? And we can unpack and retell stories when we understand the answer to that question. And there'll be multiple things we're running from. And it will be complex, and sometimes it can be dark. But this is the question I want you to ask every time you feel that block. What am I running from?
That is so powerful. I'm reminded of transcendental meditation. We learned that there's those times where you're sitting there and all of a sudden you have a need to get up in the middle of meditation. But if
What is it?
we sit through that and just allow ourselves to be and get through it, they say that stress actually leaves your body physiologically. And so you're physically releasing stress when you choose to sit through that. And that just makes me think of what we learned through all personal development, that sitting through the discomfort is the act of becoming. If you decide to get up right there, that's where your growth stops. But if you sit there and get curious about it, how does your inner guidance guide you? Is it, okay, what do I need to do to breathe through this? Or is it, where is this coming from? Or is this, what is this reminding me of? Allow your own inner guidance to spark those questions and see what comes up. And do that time and time again. That's how you get to know yourself. That's how you get to know your own guidance, and you will never feel lost again.
So beautiful. And you're so right. Like, it's very like meditation, the creative practice. I think that there are some similarities there, and like similarities like in how it impacts our bodies, that are very, very interesting. But sitting through the discomfort of not liking what you're creating, sitting through the discomfort of feeling like a fraud, sitting through the discomfort of thinking, why did they get that big book deal and I didn't? Like, if you can sit through that and realize that you are actually very safe, oh my God, the magic that happens, the growth that happens. I think another thing I really quickly wanted to flag is that you also have to learn how to talk to yourself in those situations. And I think a problem that arises for a lot of us is that you may ask, what are you running from? But the tone in which you're asking it is really fucking mean. And I had a very cruel inner critic for most of my life. So why are you running from? Why are you so weak? Why are you so lazy? Why can't you just do this? That was the tone of my internal monologue all the time. And so a big part of moving through the blocks for me was yes, being curious about what the blocks were, but actually also just learning how to speak to myself compassionately as I navigated them. And I now have the most compassionate, motherly, soft internal voice because I made it happen, because I'm the author of my own life, because I rewrote the way I spoke to myself. And that helps me navigate any block I come across. And I speak to myself like a child. I'm like, oh, Amie, I know it's really hard, but you're safe. You're so safe. You're doing so well. I'm so proud of you. This is tricky. This is really hard. But you're allowed to make mess and you're allowed to not know. Just sit here for a moment longer and see what happens next. And I built this kind of language into the way that I create.
I love that because I found too, actually in the speech I just gave, the my inner child work, there was a moment, a specific moment during a breathwork session that I connected with my inner child in a way. And I saw that same thing. I saw that the voices I had been allowing to play on repeat in my head, like some sort of a toxic playlist, had been bringing me down my whole life. And if I can't even learn how to talk to myself with compassion, then how am I going to, like, what energy am I creating from? And so that compassion piece, I think, is quite often this like hidden hurdle that people going down the self-development route have to harness, because all of a sudden they develop this new sense of awareness. And so less things in their life are autopilot, but then that awareness is like new levels, new devils. You start to actually see what you're working with. And it's really hard not to be judgmental or critical of all of this new stuff that you're seeing. But if you stay in that criticism, if you stay in that judgment, just like I said, that is then the energy that you're creating your life from, which is separation. It's not unity. It's not oneness. It's not love. It's separation. And so you're hardening your heart. You're closing yourself off to the feeling of infinite, the connection that we actually have between all things. And so it's that part where it's like, okay, now I have the awareness. That's actually the easy part, whether we like to believe that or not. But now it's like, what am I going to do with that awareness? How am I going to choose to see myself through the eyes of the divine light that I actually am versus like everything that we've been running from?
Yes. So it's so important. You speak so beautifully, obviously. Like this is what you're the master, and I love watching you do your art. But yeah, I agree. I think this is actually the core piece when we talk about blocks. Like you're right, the awareness is important, but how you're going to treat yourself when you become aware. And I see so many artists who, have a lot of measures of traditional success, but the way they relate to themselves is toxic. And to me, it's just that is not my successful creative life. And you see so many of these artists who have it all in inverted commas, and the way that they speak over themselves, the way that they do not feel enough, the way they're constantly seeking external validation, the way they need permission from everybody else. It ain't it. This ain't the life that we are striving for. Creative success for me is the fact that I have a compassionate, gentle inner voice who takes care of my inner artist so beautifully. And that for me means that every day I wake up and I feel like a success.
Well, I love leaving listeners with one thing to either think about or to do to bring all of this into their reality. What would you leave them with this week?
Okay. I want you to take like a timer. I want you to do 2, maybe 3 minutes, and I want you to make a truly shitty piece of art. And I know as you listen to me, you're going to be thinking, okay, but I'm going to make it like a pretty good shitty piece of art, or I'm going to make it the most impressive shitty piece of art that you're going to be so amazed. Stop. I want you to make something truly terrible. And I want you to sit with the voices in your head as you make this crappy piece of art. Maybe it's a shitty poem. Maybe it's like just a doodle. I just want you to be kind to yourself as you make something that doesn't satisfy you. And I want you to practice speaking very kindly to yourself, even in ways that make you feel very uncomfortable. So as you write in a cringy, cringy sentence, and then I want you to make it even cringier, like go back and make it worse. Talk to yourself and say, I'm allowed to make mess. It is safe to make things that are kind of crap.
I am going to take you up on this homework because it sounds glorious. And I want to remind people too that, we hear things like art changes your brain, spirituality changes your brain, meditation, playing the piano, and it does, but you don't need to be good at it for it to do that. And so actually,
you don't.
Most of the growth happens during that part where you really suck. That's where you really train your brain. That's where you really get all of the benefits from it. And so I want to remind you guys that it's not wasted time or wasted canvas or wasted paper. You are creating yourself through this act, regardless of what that piece of paper or canvas looks like in the end. So for listeners that are resonating with you as much as I have been this whole conversation, like I want to be best friends, where can people find you?
I'm so grateful for you, Melissa. That was magic. And I just really quickly want to say that in that book with all the research, every single thing they say is like, it's never about the skill level. It's only about the act of creation. So you're spot on there, Melissa. You can find me on Instagram at Inspired to Write. You can find my new book, We Need Your Art, on all major platforms. And if you want to come spend some time with me, you can just come to my website, amiemcnee.com. You can come do some journaling courses with me or some art classes with me. My community, my creative community, is opening soon too, which is a beautiful way to get to work with me.
All the links from this episode will be at mindlove.com/388. Your challenge for this week is to make something terrible. I mean it. Set a timer for 2 or 3 minutes and create the messiest, most imperfect thing that you can. Then practice being kind to yourself while doing it. Notice what comes up when you give yourself permission to make something just for the sake of creating. No judgment, no perfectionism, just pure creative play. So give it a try and let me know how it goes. You can reach me at mindlovemelissa on Instagram. Also, when Amie and I were talking about being the creator of your own life, it reminded me of something that I've been working on that feels almost magical. If you're ready to step into your role as the creator of your life, but you aren't sure where to start, I created something special for you. So go to mindlove.com/vision for my Vision Compass tool. So this isn't your typical dream big exercise. It's actually a tool that helps you uncover what actually lights you up from the inside out. In just a few minutes, you'll discover the key elements that need to be present for you, for your vision to actually feel real and energizing. Because, like we talked about in the episode, if you don't have a clear vision for your life, you'll end up following someone else's. And so, like I said, this tool feels like magic. You're going to love it. Everyone who's used it so far has felt like it was mind-blowing and it spoke to the depths of their soul. So I'm giving it to you for free, mindlove.com/vision. You can find all of my incredible sponsors at mindlove.com/sponsors. And don't forget to sign up for the Morning Mind Love at mindlove.com or text the word morning to 33777. Thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning into Your Higher Frequency with Mind Love. Head to mindlove.com for a free gift to keep your vibes up until next week.